right. Well, welcome everybody to our Q&A. So today, I mean, I'll let Stephen talk about what we're going to do today, but I'll focus on just a few minutes talking about the Innovation Hub. So we have a group of students that are participating in our student startup initiative. So they've been participating for several weeks, and although campus has been closed and the semester is over, they're still working on their startup. So as best as we can support them, we're going to do that. And we appreciate them doing all the work they've done. And those students who are interested or watch this later and interested in getting involved, just email us and we'll see how we can get you connected to the Innovation Hub and the Student Startup Program. Hopefully come this fall, we'll be able to do some in-person events and discussions and things like that. But until then, until we know that further, we'll keep doing some of these Zoom calls. But also Innovation Hub, and this is for Brianna, Sunny, any other students. We do have that summer challenge that's come up. I think you guys would be great at knocking out parts of that. And there's some cash prizes that would be probably beneficial. So take a look at that. That's at the Innovation Hub website, and I can send more details later on. But welcome everybody, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Sam. And one question I have on the challenge: can other people, like in the community, be part of that challenge too? Is that what you're saying? You're opening?
So we do have a community group. So if you would just want to participate, just share your ideas, what you're thinking. The theme of the program is for K through 12 schools, focusing on how to get them back on campus this fall. We know that that's an important part of, people going back to work is they have to get their kids back into school. And so there's a lot of challenges. I know California, for example, they just released a 62-page checklist that schools have to go through in order for them to get back to campus safely. And so lots of challenges they're going to face, and we want to come up with hopefully some ideas to help them along through that process. So the challenge is basically an executive summary where you kind of share with you problems you're trying to address and some of the solutions you would recommend to do. And those could be products, they could be services, they could be programs, they could, a combination of different things as we focus on helping K through 12 schools. So yeah, it's available to community, it's available to students. You can find out more on the website. So.
No, thanks, Professor Clarke. That's great. Stephen, I was gonna have you just in some ways talk about what we're gonna do today, and if you have any feedback about YouTube or anything, I'll let you have the floor, and I have all the questions that we need to answer to.
Sure, awesome. Yeah, I think Sam kind of did that quick intro there. So I guess for those of you who are just tuning in, welcome to another edition of Tech School. So today, like Kurling mentioned, today we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A with our team. There's a lot of, we deal with a lot of startups, entrepreneurs, and people like that. So they come to us with a lot of questions. Some of them, have kind of the same frame of mind, and we've seen some that have helped a lot of people out. So I know Kurling has a few questions in mind we were going to give some answers to that hopefully have some impact and help people out. And then we also wanted to give the opportunity for everyone out there to submit questions. We posted on social media about that and things like that. So yeah, we'll be doing a little Q&A, and if you're watching this a little later on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and it helps our reach and helps us help more people. So
that's great. One thing offhand, Stephen, one of the questions was kind of like the origin of Tech School offhand, how we did things internally. Did you want to discuss that at all a little bit, like how Tech School started?
Sure. You want me to just tell like how we started out and So our idea for Tech School actually originated as something internal, right? Something we could do with our internal team. And it started from, we were having a lot of student interns and things like that work for us, especially on the engineering side of things, right? web developers, people doing a lot of machine learning for us, helping with our internal, matching up startups with mentors and things like that. And we thought, well, there's such like a little bit of a disconnect from let's say you have a intern who's a graduate student versus, let's say, an intern who's, a sophomore in an undergrad, right? But you want them to be able to have the opportunity to work from each other and learn from each other, right? And, or even, maybe the disconnect between somebody in that realm versus, their manager who has quite a bit more experience, right? You want them to be able to work together in a great manner. And so we thought, well, could we do kind of like a fast track program to get them up to speed, do some kind of like a educational program to give them, the education they need, the skills they need to be able to make an impact on that project, right? So they could walk away and say, hey, I learned something, but I was also able to apply it, right? I was able to execute on that, which sometimes is a little bit of the disconnect between some of the things we do in school, that you learn all these great things about it, but sometimes it's a whole nother thing to try to build a product off of those ideas, right? And with the great tools that we were using in, let's say, our engineering space and machine learning and all that fun stuff, we thought it was a great opportunity for our interns. So Kurling and I and some of our internal team kind of devised a little curriculum, and we started kind of playing around with it. Okay, that worked good for this set of interns, that didn't work good for this set, and it evolved over time. And then we had a couple speakers kind of take part in that as well, and it evolved into something, and we said, hey, this might be cool for other people to listen in, right? And so we had other students and maybe some startups listen in as well. And then we did a talk or two of those at like San Diego Startup Week, and we got a lot of positive feedback like, hey, I want to tune into the next session, right? And then it became, okay, maybe we could mold this into something that's more external facing versus just solely internal for our interns, right? An internal team to help them along. And so, long story short, it kind of evolved into what it is today. Does that explain it pretty well, Curling?
Yeah, that's good. The main thing I'm just telling people that we did it internally first, and then we actually felt like it was really helpful for other people. I know we have a couple of people on, like Larry Maxham. He's part of a lot of our city highlights. How you doing, Larry? Definitely was a great mentor. How you doing, Larry? And we have other people that's on. So some of the questions we have too, and Professor Clarke, jump in on some of these questions we had from some of the startups too. I think in some ways, some of them are really going to be dear to your heart too, Professor Clarke, just for the fact that these are challenges. We actually, this Q&A was like, what challenges do some of these startups have offhand? First question was like, building a team for my business is like so challenging, right? So what are some tips for like building a team for what, especially some of these startups are like tech startups. They're actually in some ways need more than one person heading it. But that's the first question for everybody. I will pose that to Professor Clarke though.
Well, thanks for starting off with me. Yeah,
I like that.
Oh, no problem. When we're looking at teams, you're obviously the starting place is going to be your business model, right? Because what you want to do is, as you create a business model, identify where you are lacking certain necessary skills, right? So you don't want to just add people to the team because they're your friends or whatever it might be, or they can help in one way or another, but really be strategic and look at that business model and say, where is it that we need specific people? What can I do in the business model, and what do I need somebody else to do? I think that's the most critical. Every person at an early stage should contribute to a specific part of your business model. We always say there's always going to be somebody to build it, somebody to sell it, right? So if you're good at selling, you really need to find the person who can focus on the build portion of it. If you're good at building, you're an engineer, you should look at somebody to sell as part of your business model. But as your team grows, you should be identifying key components that needs a specific person to maximize, customers through that process. So that's what I look at when I'm trying to build team is, and when I look at startups and they put up their team, where do these people fit in that business model? Where do they contribute? Because what sometimes startups fail is, or where they make mistakes is, they have everybody who's really good at, you say, the business part, but they've not identified anybody to do the engineering or the building. Or they're really good at the engineering, they haven't really identified who's going to be needed in the selling. So just some thoughts there.
No, that's great. Stephen, any feedback?
I know we've talked to a few startups that, somebody comes from a big business background, has an awesome idea on what they want to do, is great on, let's say, like Clarke mentioned, Sam mentioned the selling portion, but they need somebody to build it, right? And like, how do I get an engineer to build this app or build this product or whatever, right? And I think one of the things we've seen that's been really effective is if you can immerse yourself and say in kind of that community, it allows you to find those people easier. Meaning that if you go to, if you start connecting with people, let's say at, we mentioned San Diego Startup Week earlier. If you start connecting with people there, you can find out and then start figure out, okay, hey, they have engineers. How did you find your engineering team, or how did you, and start learning from people and stuff like that. Or I know that's been kind of an effective way for some people we know.
No, that's great. Like being part of that kind of founder ecosystem has been very helpful. I know at USC, there's like this great little ecosystem, there's competition, stuff like that, so people can kind of talk like, oh wow, how did you get that person who's really good at helping you build that wireframe, or even at least building out just the MVP, and they actually talk a lot on that part. I think the one tactical thing, I was going to go back to Professor Clarke, is there any tactical pieces on how finding like a person or finding a co-founder that you've seen that worked?
Well, you got to, it's like dating them, right? When you're talking about founders and partners, it's one thing if you're paying them and they're at-will employees, and you've raised some money or you have some money and you're hiring people. But if you're looking at partnering with somebody where they're going to be kind of sharing leadership roles, and that's a big decision and very hard. And I think you'd make that decision very, very carefully. So because getting out of that type of partnership can be very difficult if it doesn't work out. So it's not something you should do lightly. Sometimes it's a different, like in a classroom setting, we kind of just put people together and say, hey, you guys are going to work on a project. You're going to, start an idea. And that's not how I would approach it in the real world. I'd be selective of who works best and find somebody that matches. Not only, I made a post the other day. We oftentimes envision what our startup would look like, but we also need to envision what our partnership looks like, right? Just like as a spouse, a couple, they envision their future. You have to almost have that same attitude, and like, what does this partnership look like going into the future? And do we align? Do we have the same vision? Do we have the same goals? Things like that.
No, that's great. There is one good book I'll give for like a tactical piece. It's called Founder's Dilemma by Noam Wasserman. It does talk about some of these issues that founders have, and why it is really good too. From like a personal experience, like I actually found a lot of my really great founders is when I went to school with them. They were my study group, and I like knew how they worked, like how they actually dealt with things for a longer stint of time, right? We were study partners up for like 6 months. I kind of knew a little bit about them and their personality. So it wasn't like we were just jumping into a startup. I didn't know a little bit about their personality. So that's one. I always tell people, take some time with it, do a little small project with them first, and understand that piece, but also be part of these kind of communities. Like San Diego Startup Week has these kind of all these events where you meet other founders. There's a lot of meetups you can meet founders and just understand, just like being immersed in the community is one of the most important things. I hopefully, like with Innovation Hub, what Professor Clarke is doing is trying to create that community here in North County. So that's good. I Another question is actually more switching up is on the fact that most startups, and I use this from Professor Clarke too, most startups are thinking about this being Amazon of everything versus being this Amazon of books first, right? So one of the challenges was what's the best way to kind of pick out elements of your startups to focus on? What could be your MVP, but what are some tactics that we can actually use in a startup to actually pick out like elements you should work on first? Maybe that might be a better way of putting it. I can pose that to Stephen first.
Sure. Kurling, and I know that, we've had some of these conversations, our internal team, especially years ago, thinking about, okay, focus and stuff like that. But, I think you got to start with, you got to make a decision on what you're going to be best at, right? So like in terms of, if we're talking about focus, like what's our secret sauce, right? So what are we going to be, strive to be kind of best in the world at, right? And you start there with Amazon. They started with books, and there's a few, if you can go back and listen to old interviews with like Jeff Bezos and figure out why he chose books, right? There was a lot of reasons on, the opportunity that he saw about, selling books online and stuff like that. And then of course, they became kind of the best online retailer for books, and they expanded from there, right? You try to, expand too early and kind of get your, put all your efforts in too many places at once, and then you just become average at everything, right? You want to kind of avoid that. And I think that also ties into the idea of having a North Star for your business or idea, right? Whether you're a for-profit business or even a nonprofit, the people who founded those companies that become successful, they all have some sort of North Star, right? Some sort of thing, okay, we're going to strive to be the best in the world at this, or, this is kind of our vision or our mission, right? And so I think that really, drives, especially a startup, to know, okay, at the end of the day, are we making progress towards that, right? And I think if you keep doing that, that's a good place to start.
That's good. Professor Clarke, any feedback on that?
I think as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have that, I think Stephen that says the North Star, you have that vision of what you want to become, but in the end, you have to start making money too, right? So a lot of times I look at is what's the simplest thing you can build today to start making some money so that you can actually, get that, capture that vision at some point in time. So it's one of those hard things, because as an entrepreneur, you want to build the best thing you possibly can, but that's some imaginary visionary thing in the future. What you need to do today also is build something that you can sell, so that you have money, you have motivation, you have those things to keep pursuing that thing you're envisioning. So oftentimes it doesn't look like what you envision when you start selling products, but there's a lot of people out there who have challenges that something you can do can solve. And then with that, hopefully you bootstrap, and with that cash, you can start building the things that you really think will make the biggest difference. And that's why I always say Amazon of books. I would imagine, like Steve was saying, Jeff Bezos probably envisioned something far greater, but he had to make some money. He had to do some things early to capture that dream. So anyway, keep that in mind. I think that's that minimum viable product, right? Something that you can get out the door, start helping people, and then go from there.
No, that's great, Professor Clarke. We had a question that was really unique, basically on this time, right? During time, one of the startups actually was working on their vision, right? But COVID came and it kind of like lost momentum, right? There was like this kind of disconnect, right? People were kind of disconnected. So it's more like, I think you guys actually had a really good talk on that. If anyone wants to listen to Sam and Stephen's talk on momentum, that might be really good. But is there a way you guys can just think about, like, during this time, how can people gain back that momentum in a sense? Like, what are some things they could possibly do? I know it's really unique question. That's why I actually like it. Because a lot of our startups been calling me and like, wow, so what do I do now? I've been getting those calls a lot. Any thoughts on that, you guys?
I want to add one thing, last comment that I was
Sure.
thinking before really quickly is just that the other important thing about starting today and doing things in minimum viable products is the idea is, what if your vision is wrong? Because when we started companies 10, 15 years ago, we went out, raised a bunch of money, and then we tried to figure out if it worked or not. And, most of the time it didn't, sometimes it did. It was very expensive. We don't start businesses that way anymore. And so starting early allows you to figure out if what you think is important is really important to the customer. But going back to your question, what can people do today? I think there's a lot of pivoting going on, but whenever there's, these types of disruptions are the first sign of opportunity, right? As we in the past, what we've seen is technology was the big disruptor, and what led to a lot of opportunities was technology, and that's still the case today. Technology is a very disruptive thing and is providing lots of opportunities. But now we have this whole new disrupting situation that has turned lots of business models upside down, and what we need to do is, and somebody said this, it might have been you, Kurling, I can't remember. It's like this idea of we should be looking for those opportunities, especially right now, because I think a lot of people are in need, a lot of businesses are struggling, and there are things that we could do now. It might not be exactly what we want to do forever, but you can take advantage of some of these things.
No, that's great feedback. Stephen, you have any feedback on that? You talked about momentum before, but it might look a little bit different now in COVID.
Yeah. I guess, I'm going to go kind of broad with my feedback just to try to help as many people as possible. But what I would say, kind of off of your question, would be businesses in general. If you look at like long-term, let's say somebody who built a successful business and it's lasting, 10, 20, 30 years, over the long term, they're usually, one of the things that makes them very successful is their ability to adapt or change, or, be able to, be flexible to the world around them, right? The world today is not going to be the same as it is 10 years from now, right? Or, even in today, world is moving pretty fast. So even 5 years from now, right? New technologies are going to come about, new, different events are going to happen, right? From, what we did with, or what happened with, COVID-19 to, let's say 10 years ago, the real estate crash, the tech bubble, there's stuff that's going to happen, right? That's kind of inevitable. And how you react to those kind of determines, or is going to be a huge driver into how successful you are, especially in business. My suggestion to that would be to prime yourself, as a person, but also your business, to be able to be flexible, right? To be able to have the opportunity to pivot, and to look for opportunity, in the same way that if you're shopping for a new car and you're shopping for, let's say, some like a Toyota or a Chevy or something, you're going to be, those are the cars that you're ultimately going to be paying it more attention to on the road. You're going to be like, wow, there's a lot of, Toyotas on the road today. Well, there's not more than there was before, but now you're paying attention to them, right? In the same way that you can prime yourself to be able to seek opportunities. So when, things like COVID happens, you're primed and ready to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, right? And so you see that in, startups that are able to pivot and say, okay, we're able to do a lot of our stuff remotely, like Fokcus, for instance. Hey, we're not going to be able to meet people physically as much, but there's so much we could do remotely, right? We can do these tech school sessions. We can do a lot of stuff, right? We can pivot. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. I think sometimes you got to just be creative, right? There's a saying that, more millionaires are made during recessions than any other time. And I think that applies to just, the opportunities that come with with setbacks, right? For every setback or hurdle you're going to have to come over, it's an opportunity for you to take a good look at yourself and actually take 2 steps forward, right? And so that's probably the advice that I would give, or my feedback on that.
No, that's great. I know we have some other people online too, and I have like Matt. If you want to pose any questions on the chat, that's totally fine. You can chat if you have some question about startups or anything like that. These are some of the questions we had from our current cohort, but that's fine. Larry, if you have any questions also too about startups, but I might pose you a question, Larry. You've been in this kind of industry, being an IP lawyer for so many years, right? Seeing all types of trends, things of that nature. Do you see any trends now during this COVID time? I think even you work with technology and IP. Have you seen any trends that are like positive that people have been trying to do during this time? Or I'm just curious, Larry.
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, things have been kind of quiet. I still I'm working day to day. The patent office hasn't closed down. 2/3 of the examiners, both patent and trademark side, been working from home anyway, but didn't change that. They just stopped having any in-person meetings and any in-person hearings before the boards at the patent and trademark office. The news today is that people are filing all sorts of trademarks relating to COVID something, or to the latest thing, Black Lives Matter, and then I received a note from Trademark Journal about somebody filed one in the UK, and he was hounded out of it because he got such bad feedback that he had to withdraw it before the office even said anything to him. So those kind of things, those things come and go. Every time there's a big thing happening, people jump in and throw in all kinds of trademarks. Patents don't change, but the trademark aspect, people try to ride on it. But the problem is that trademarks require to have a business. In other words, trademark is a mark used in trade. So you just can't file an application for registration on Covidium or something, and you've got to have a business. Now you can file an intent to use, but it must be a real bona fide intent. And you can keep that alive for up to 4 years, even if it goes through, because you still have to have actual use. So those kind of things jump up, and it's coming up right now. And of course, we have 2 things that are happening that are big, overlapping each other. So we're getting a lot of that. Now, from the patent side, I don't work in the biotech area, but that's where the real stuff is going on. And that's where we're going to find what we are going to need for a vaccine, for a treatment. And you get the best minds in the world are just going, as fast as they can, 24 hours a day. And people saying that the Chinese are stealing our information. They're sharing it with each other. They're trying to get there as fast as they can. They've done it for other, like Ebola and Zika and all those others that we've had over the last 25 years or so. But they will find something, and that's where it is. I don't work in that area, but I keep reading the headlines at least, and there will be something coming out of this, and and those will be in the patent side, and they'll be filing lots and lots of patent applications. In fact, they already have, but of course they're early on. They're filing maybe provisional applications to mark their date. But that kind of stuff is going on, and otherwise things are quieter. People are sitting home, hopefully inventing, and we'll get a lot of phone calls coming up. I've seen that in the past when everything closes down and people that have nothing else to do, the inventors invent. So we may see a lot of that, and that has happened. I've experienced that before. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
No, good, Larry. You're always really insightful. I knew you were gonna have a different perspective than other people. So thanks for that. We have another question. This is a really good question. I was thinking about this a lot. Pretty much during this time, when you're having a startup on your own, what you're trying to do is you're excited about your idea, but you actually want to get other people excited about your idea. You want people to be enthusiastic about your startup. What are some ways, one, that you can be enthusiastic? How can you actually get people to be part of your team and things of that nature? So I was thinking I'll give that to Professor Clarke first, but that's a real, look, for new startups, especially solopreneurs, like that's crucial to get people on your team. But like, what's one good way of kind of getting people enthusiastic about your idea?
But I think that's a good question also for Larry, because this is one of those catch-22, right? You want to be able to go out and talk about your ideas, but you also want to make sure you don't lose any protection opportunities early on. And so it's one of those, I mean, when I'm talking to founders, it's all about the storytelling, right? Especially at really early stage opportunities where maybe you haven't even got to product development or you haven't built your prototype. You have, at some point, you still have to tell your story, because you're going to need resources. That might be financial resources, that might be business partners, that might be employees or customers or suppliers, and they have to believe what you're trying to do. And that comes down to the pitching and storytelling, and making it make sense. I always think most best opportunities that come across like my desk or through, it all makes sense from the story the founder tells, right? The problem that they're sharing is something that maybe I don't personally have, but it resonates. It's something that they've explained in a way that makes sense. The solution matches, right? It's not the biggest thing that I see, founder mistakes is that their solution doesn't quite match the problem they described, right? Maybe there's something that is misaligned. And so it's important to share that in a way, and then how you can make it work. So those are the three things I always say, be enthusiastic, tell the story. People will believe you if it makes sense. And if they believe you, they're more willing to commit resources too. Larry, you got some ideas on that too, in terms of protection.
Yeah, good points, Sam. The enthusiasm is important, and the slide deck as to telling what's going on. And there's I'd like to say a fine line, but in law, there's very few things that are fine lines. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and maybe you're too far over the line, maybe you're not. There's very few things that we can say, no, yes. But as far as a new concept, you can talk about a concept in general, but when you talk about how, that's what a patent relates to, is how you accomplish the concept, how you make the thing work from a process standpoint. You can get patents on things, you can get patents on processes. And so once you spill the beans as to how you do it, then a clock starts running, but you're maybe already out of touch with the international world. In the United States, you probably could still file later. So, but generating interest in this is what I want to do, the excitement aspect and so on, as long as you don't say how you're going to do it, you may be able to do it. Then there's the other aspect of confidential disclosure agreements, or especially when you need to have, let's say, metal bending or something, or consulting or financial, you need to talk to people. So you might, and then these are commonly referred to as a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. We call it a confidential disclosure agreement. It's really the same thing. And so you get them to sign that. That then isn't a disclosure because it's in confidence. So disclosure is going to be public. So, this is a really great point that you were raising that we face all the time, is how much is too much to be talking about. But so many people come to us and say, oh yeah, I've shared this with this, and this, and say, oh geez, what are we going to do now? And is it have you done anything that improves it in the last days, weeks, or months? If you've done, sometimes they come to us after a year, and of course it's much too late, but maybe they've been doing things in the last 11 months that are significantly improving it and may be patentable in themselves. So we're always asking those kind of questions and trying to delve deeply into, and of course, hoping they're telling the truth.
No, good feedback, Larry. I know you always tell me it's like a case by case, right? It's good to learn more about the company and its history. But yeah, great feedback. I'm going to pose this question to Stephen. Stephen, one of the founders, was talking about what's the best social media to market your company on? We're talking about that enthusiasm, right? It kind of follows that part. You want to get not only people in your circle enthusiastic, but people outside your circle. What's your thought process that? You can even use Fokcus as an example too, Stephen, about what social media and stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, as far as social media goes, I know that, myself and a few of our interns have kind of been experimenting with this quite a bit, right? With Fokcus, and trying to, play around with it and learning quite a bit in that regard. More than we, knew, months ago or years ago. But my suggestion in terms of, okay, how are you going to approach social media and what way to do it best would be the first step is to, understand, so there's a lot of social media platforms out there, right? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, a lot of, fun things out there. And there's a lot of users and a lot of people on each of them. The first thing I would say would be to, talk to some of your customers, right? If you're working in the construction industry, if you're working in tech, or whoever your, client customer is that you're selling to, figure out what they're on, right? It may be that, for instance, we had Izzy on here, and, he does a sports podcast. But where do people talk about sports, right? Sports, of course, kind of happens on just about every platform. But he found out, okay, well, Twitter, because of what's available there and how it works, is very easy for, athletes to have conversations with regular people, right? Or people to kind of discuss and have banter about different sports topics. And so he said, well, I need to be on Twitter then, right? And so, but on the flip side, let's say you own a landscaping company, right? And, Instagram, for instance, is very like visually oriented, right? The main thing on there is like pictures. So there might be a lot of people who look at, ways to landscape their yard or ways to, interior decorate their home on something like Instagram or something like Pinterest, right? So I think, the more that your product, your service, what you're trying to offer to people, and then trying to align that with the platform really helps you be able to choose, where to start, right? And where to kind of build that, right? In the same sense of, we talked about Amazon starting with books, having a place to start, say, okay, this is going to, build my influence. And eventually, I might dabble in some of the other platforms and maybe get clients or customers from there or increase my reach from there. But you have to have a place to start. And so I think that's a good way to approach it. The other way would be when you jump on a social media platform, a lot of people have difficulty with the reach and actually having people view their stuff, right? And I think some of that plays into storytelling, right? The same way that you would do a pitch, or let's say you're giving a talk on your business or something to an investor. You might say, okay, I watch a couple different TED Talks and they're really informative and they have a really way of presenting and storytelling that material. How do they do it, right? Can I reverse engineer some things from there, or learn from them and apply them to be able to, have a bigger impact on my pitch, right? Have like an emotional connection with the person I'm pitching to be able to have them be, more interacted with what I'm saying, right? Have a better storytelling experience. And so you can do the same thing with social media. Look at the way people the way people communicate on one platform isn't going to be the way they communicate on another, right? Twitter versus Instagram versus Facebook, right? And knowing the difference allows you to be able to, tell your story in the best way it can be told for the audience that's on there, right? Something that is, in, I guess, lieu of better words, like native to that platform, right? And so that's kind of the approach that I would have to. I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, so sorry if I'm talking your ear off there, but
no, it's good. I was actually looking at any more question. I know offhand we had a heartfelt session with the cohort earlier today, and both our founders, Brianna, she's kind of the CEO of a group called Citizen Hive. It's like a senior care company who's in essence bringing kind of like this technology, but also this kind of Airbnb aspect of senior care. We also have Sunny, Black Logic, bringing kind of technology and this new way of being kind of more transparent on getting products for landscaping, this construction industry. And they're both women, right? that definitely in that construction industry that Sunny's in, definitely male dominated. So we were just talking about like women founders in general, some of the challenges is that they have on conveying their message, conveying their value as a startup and things of that nature. So we were talking about that. It was really, really, really heartfelt. I actually, in a lot of ways, want to delve into this more. I felt like we can maybe have a whole session on that. But I do want to just put in the fact that some of the challenges with the women founders I initially heard of was just the lack of capital going into women founder led companies. I think it's something like 2%, right? Compared to male founders and their companies. I'm going to pose that to you in some ways, Professor Clarke, too. What are some ways that women founders can overcome some of those kind of disadvantages that they might have as founders? Maybe there's certain things that you've kind of seen. I have some feedback too about some other aspect, but I know you're teaching the next generation, Professor Clarke, of founders, and just want to get your feedback on some of that.
Yeah. So I have a document. I'll share that with Brianna and Sunny on Slack, because I don't recall it off the top of my head, but I know there's some facts about, some of the challenges that women's face in raising money, and some of the things that I can recall. Obviously there's oftentimes a difference in the category or the type of startup they do. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. We don't know why, but yeah, women tend to be interested in different things than a lot of men. There was another fact that I remember off the top of my head is that there's an interesting thing that women ask for less money. And I'm not quite sure why that's the case. Whereas, men are going and asking for a lot more money from investors. So I'll pull up that document and do some research and post it to them. But it is more challenging, and I think hopefully it's changing, right? Fokcus has a female, group of founders. Kurling, you're oftentimes, your face is showing up, but there's a lot of women involved in the founding of Fokcus. My wife's an entrepreneur, runs a successful business, and I see that, and in my it's like there's no difference, and so I hope that those things change in the future, and that there's more accessible capital for women. And I know there's a lot of interest in it, and there's a lot of impact funds and different things coming up to say, hey, we should look at these. And it goes the same, I think, going on a little bit different. We talk about this a lot, Kurling, that, for example, minority, we service a big minority population on CSUSM. And what you really find is that their ideas aren't better, in a sense, better, worse than some of the ideas coming out of Silicon Valley. They're just different, because some groups of people have different challenges than other groups of people, right? And so I think some of the difficulty raising money for some groups is that the people who are evaluating opportunities don't necessarily relate to those challenges, because that's not the environment they were in. And as a result, I think what the big thing would be is to be able to be a great storyteller, to share that so that they can relate. Hopefully it changed, but it's definitely still a challenge that we're trying to overcome.
No, that's great. Thanks for being transparent. I have Joanna, as co-founder of Fokcus, on too. I just want do you want to share anything or your experience or some opportunities that you've seen as a woman founder and a couple startups? You got it, Joanna?
Yeah, I was, as Sam was talking, as Professor Clarke was talking, I was thinking about, I heard the founder of Onyx, which is like a beauty subscription box, talk about what it was like to raise money. And she was saying that she just had to come armed with a lot of data about her market, that she was African American and she was female, and they're just there was just funders were not educated about the market, and they were saying like, is there even a market for this? And she just had to come with like a lot of data to be able to make the case for her product. So I think, there's that aspect of what you were just saying about, people not really familiar with the problems that female founders are trying to solve. And then I also was thinking about my own experience, which is, I had before Fokcus, I had a different startup, and it was sort of like a niche craft product. And I had a global distribution, and I had decent sales and good traction and great, press, but I felt like not a real company. And I think there were a couple of things in play there. One is I felt like, investors invest in things like biotechs and software companies with big teams. And so I felt like my product and my business wasn't an investable business. I briefly toyed with, talking to an angel investor that was a friend of a friend about, I needed $5,000 to buy equipment, which sounds like, such a small amount of money, but it seemed like all the money in the world. And I was so nervous, and I just, like, I couldn't even drum up the courage to have the conversation with her about asking for a $5,000 loan to buy some equipment that would make my business, 10x, more efficient and allow me to take on more business. So I think there's sort of like a imposter syndrome element of it, and just like there wasn't another person like me. I searched all over for like, is there anybody else who's already started a business like this that I could talk to? And I did find someone in Seattle who I sort of struck up a friendship with, but we were also competitors. So I think it was a small market, and so even though she was sharing information with me about distributors and suppliers and ways to be more efficient and what, even what materials to use to make my products, at the same time, like, every piece of information that she gave me, like, potentially gave me market share too. And so I think there was some reluctance so it's very hard to find a mentor who was actually willing to help me. So I think, I don't know, those are just a few of my random thoughts about, some of the challenges of, I think some of those apply to any founder, right? A first-time founder or a solo founder, especially. I think with Fokcus, it's been a much different experience because we had a team when we founded, and early on added some additional people, and so it felt a lot more real and tangible. Even though my other business had like paid employees, it still didn't feel like a real company to me. Anyway.
No, that's great. I mean, I want to get your thoughts just because you're always really authentic, Joanna. Yeah. Like, you're really transparent. I think that's what, like, women founders need to hear that, right? Yeah. So I mean, that's key. So thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. We are at that 12:50 mark. So I think we're going to try somewhat close out this session. This was a really good Q&A session. Thank you guys all for coming on. I think, Larry, it was really fun to see you. Definitely thanks for all your feedback. Brianna and Sunny were amazing at giving us some of these questions, and some of the other startups too. I think Professor Clarke, thank you always for your insights, and for everyone else too. Like, we can continue this dialogue. We seem like every 6 episodes we do this Q&A, so we'll do one. Any final thoughts? One, Sam, with you, and Stephen, you can kind of end it.
I'll just say one last thing on the female founders. The thing that I think is most important to say is that I think that they I've seen a lot be super successful. They do tackle problems that are important. I think they hustle more because of that, and they end up being much better founders and much more successful. And So it's always, like I said, my wife's an entrepreneur, and to watch her be successful, it's like, hey, this is something that lots of people can do. So for Brianna and Sunny and any other female founders, like, yeah, there's a group like this is designed to help you hopefully avoid some of the challenges other people have faced, but you have a chance to be successful if you want to be. And so rely on everybody in the group, and we'll help you get there.
That's great. Larry, you're on pause. Did you want to say anything? Any final thoughts?
I was talking about women entrepreneurs in the years over a long period of time anyway. When I started engineering school, we had 160 students, 6 women. When I started law school, we had 160 students, 6 women. And that has changed so fast, but women still don't get into electronics and mechanical engineering hardly at all, but they get into the chemical and the biotech area, massive numbers. And so that's, for some, I've never understood that. But as far as law, by the time I'd been practicing for less than 10 years, Northeastern University Law School became the first in the country with a majority of women. A big change from 6 out of 160 to a majority. And I think that's true now pretty much across the country. So those things have changed. That has nothing to do really with entrepreneurialism, except that I think that a lot of lawyers and engineers have a better chance of being entrepreneurs, having had the success of that background. And I don't know if that ties in or not, but it's interesting. I've observed that before probably almost any of you were born. But it was interesting to see that transition. And I hope that continues in the entrepreneurial aspect, at least as much, and maybe, well, if it does it as fast, it was pretty quick that I observed.
No, thanks, Larry. That actually is really good. I found out a lot of my friends who are lawyers, really great thought process on being entrepreneurs. It's just really great. Like, it's a good little easy transition from that. So I like that. I like that trend. And thanks for coming on. Stephen, I'll let you close out.
Sure. Yeah, I guess just a final thought on what Larry and Sam and you have been talking about. One of the things that we've seen, especially from some of the startups that we've dealt with, some of them being driven by minorities or women, and a lot of them have been very successful and stuff like that. It's interesting for us to see that you hear that everyone brings their own perspective on things, right? Own perspective on an idea or a situation, or their environment, challenges they may face, approaches they may have to be able to solve those challenges. And just to kind of echo some of the things that Sam said, women and people that may not be traditionally somebody who might be speaking on a topic, or somebody in a profession, they bring a lot of neat perspectives on things. And I think that's one of the reasons that we see a lot of women founders be as successful as they are, right? They bring perspectives that aren't common, and solutions that people don't readily think of, right? And so it's been really cool to see some of these successes of women and minority founders in that regard, just from the startups that we've worked with, right? And just say, especially in today's world versus 10 or 20 years ago, there's a lot more opportunity out there, which is really cool to see, for everyone. So but yeah, I guess just to close it out, you wanted me to kind of close it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you guys for tuning into to Tech School. Yeah, we did a great Q&A today. Kurling asked some awesome questions. We had some awesome, internal team members and a few other people answer them. So that was great. We even had Joanna on today, which is awesome. She's not hasn't been usually on our Tech School session, so it's cool to see her and Larry and everyone else. Just to kind of echo what we talked about at the beginning, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It helps us with our reach and helps, videos like this reach more people. And so, more people see them, the more people we can help. So I would probably just say that, but thank you guys for tuning in.